They've always wondered, how did an immigrant from India and a redneck from Alabama work so well together?
I think it has a lot to do with our personalities. It was only until so many linemen cut out and fell that somebody had the grit, had the courage to say, we're better than this. We ought to have a safety strap around that pole the entire time we're climbing, and we can eliminate cutout and falls altogether. This is an accident we can eliminate.
What do you think of LSU fans?
You know, if I had a choice and I was Nick Saban, I'd rather go to Alabama than LSU any day. You're not going to get me in trouble, Hari. You're not going to get me to say the wrong thing. I have LSU friends.
Arch Manning.
I hope he's not as good as advertised, but I'm afraid he is.
Where do you think AI has a role in human performance, or does it? Does it have a role in human performance? What's your take on that?
And let's say we can use AI to calculate data, to process data in a quicker fashion, in a more timely fashion, and use that information from a predictability perspective.
When I was running Think Power about 5 years back, we were almost lost $10 million because of exactly what you're talking about, poor practices in accounting and finance. Since then, I hired who arguably is the best CFO in the industry, and he's taken it to the next level by using some HP principles.
What the organization values is what's going to drive the employee's behavior. You've done a great job at both Think Power Solutions and at KYRO in getting the buy-in from your employees because you treat them right.
All right, welcome to a new episode of From Boots to Boardroom. Not every leader sits in a corner office. From Boots to Boardroom shares the journey of those who power America, from the job site to the boardroom, with grit, tenacity, empathy, and vision. They're the real leaders. Today's episode is sponsored by KYRO AI. Digitize work and maximize profits. For more information, visit KYRO.ai. Today's guest is Jeff White. Jeff is an expert in human performance and helped me tremendously in establishing a great culture at Think Power Solutions. Truth be told, he joined me at Think Power when it was at its absolute lowest moment, when there was an incident that we were involved in, leading to a loss of life, unfortunately, and we had just lost a contract, 5-year contract worth $60 million from Entergy. Nobody would have touched me with a 100-foot pole. But here is a man who decided to help a young entrepreneur and set the stage to completely revamp Think Power Solutions and lead it towards success. Jeff, welcome to the show. Thank you so much. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you, Hari. Those are some kind words, and I would back up and say that Jeff White is not an expert. Jeff White is a practitioner.
All right. So let's get rolling here, right? So you have a super interesting and truly a boots to boardroom story here. You started off as a helper, if I remember right, and went all the way to be the manager of human performance and skills training at Southern Company within their various entities, operating companies, and then went on to advise boardrooms, CEOs, CXOs. Where did it all get started for you? Give us the origin story.
Okay, so without being too long or too boring, I think a quick history of my experience might help launch human performance in the discussions. I did start out in 1978 as a helper, which was a real nice word for janitor, if you will, with Alabama Power Company. My tools were a mop and a broom. And I had gone to junior college about 1.5 years. I had a little bit of education, but went to work with the power company because they were paying so much better than a coach and a teacher was at that time. So I progressed through the power company from a helper to a tree trimmer, to a truck operator, to an apprentice lineman in both the transmission and distribution crews, to journeyman lineman in both the transmission and distribution crews. And while I was a journeyman, I decided to go back to school. So 2 nights a week and on some weekends, for 3 years without taking a break, I climbed poles during the day and sat in the classroom for 4 hours at night until I got a degree in business, a bachelor's degree in business. And that opened up some doors for me. At the time, in 1990, there were not too many journeyman linemen with 4-year degrees. And of those opportunities, I selected to go into the safety department. And I spent 13 years in safety and health at Alabama Power. Spent more time in the regulatory world than I did out in the field with the crews, but I did a little bit of both. But after 13 years in safety and health, I decided to try something different. So I got my first supervisor's job at Panama City Beach, Florida, the engineering and construction supervisor on the beach. Now, that's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. A lot of distractions, right?
I know.
We're going to talk about distractions here in a minute.
You got a lot to complain about being in a beach, right? So who gave you
Yeah,
the job, man? So,
yeah, but probably one of the best jobs I've ever had in my life was working with people from both engineering and construction and maintenance, just the full gamut of people in the electric utility industry. And I could have retired there, was very happy there. However, an opportunity came open at Mississippi Power as the manager of safety and skills training. And my heart was in safety and training, so I accepted that position, interviewed and accepted that position, and thought that I would retire there. So here I have worked for Alabama Power. I had gone to Gulf Power in Panama City, and now I'm with Mississippi Power in Gulfport, Mississippi. When I first heard the term human performance, and I saw a presentation on human performance, and then I was approached by some leaders at Southern Company and said, "We think you would be a good person to introduce and integrate human performance at Southern Company on the non-nuclear side." Now the nuclear industry had been in human performance probably since 3 Mile Island, right? But never in the T&D world. The more I read about human performance, the more I learned about human performance, I thought, this is what we've been missing in this industry for years. So I accepted the role as the human performance coordinator for Southern Company, and we started in just the transmission area, transmission lines, transmission subs, and it grew very quickly. So I think I was probably a good candidate for that role for a number of reasons. Number one is I like to talk, as you can tell. And also, through my years of experience, I had done everything from a janitor to a journeyman and also a supervisor and a manager. And I knew a lot of people across the Southern Company footprint working in 3 of the 4 operating companies. So I think that set me up good for my role in human performance.
for those who may not be familiar with human performance, if you had an elevator pitch, right, 20 seconds, how would you define human performance?
So when I use the word human performance, that includes HP, which I like to use for human performance. It also includes HU, which the nuclear world uses, that acronym. It also includes an acronym that's used a lot today, which is HOP, which is human and organizational performance, as well as HPI, which is human performance improvement. But when I hear any of those acronyms, I think about the same thing. And that is, it's an operating philosophy that recognizes that people make mistakes, that we're human. And it really examines a different way of thinking, a way of thinking away from blame and more to learning. And I'll leave it at that until we get further into the discussion.
So, to err is human. That's the basis on which human performance is built, right? So, I learned from you that on an average, human beings make 3 to 5 mistakes every hour. Many of those mistakes we just don't realize we're making, but we are making, and they don't have that much of an impact. So we kind of shrug it off and move on. We don't even realize it, even to shrug off. But under duress, under stress, under strain, under pressure, we make 12 to 15 mistakes an hour. That's a lot. So multiply the 3 to 5 by 4, you're 12 to 15. which means when you make more mistakes, the odds of one of those mistakes cascading into a much bigger issue is very high. I mean, that is the reason why we're trying to put in HP, so that you're not making those big mistakes. Is that a good way to think about it, Jeff?
Absolutely. I mean, when you put pressure on a human being in a stressful environment, and we try to do things faster and easier, quicker, our mind may be not focusing on things we ought to be focusing on. The probability of making that mistake increases, and the consequences usually are more severe.
Yes. Okay. So now that we've kind of introduced HP, what is HP? Give me some of the basic principles of HP to the listener. I mean, think about it. At Think Power, we had, and KYRO, honestly, we had 5 years and 2-3 years respectively to kind of roll out human performance. We had a lot of time. Here, people are going to listen to 30 minutes, 40 minutes, so they have to really understand that, right? It goes to the very essence of how you and I met originally, right? I had hosted a session on human performance back in 2013 or 14 at Edison Electric Institute. Hosted Kent Peterson from Excel Energy. And when it was time to introduce human performance to Think Power, I reached out to Kent. He connected me with you. I spoke to you and others. And the reason I'm saying this is I had two fundamental options. One is to have a homegrown approach to human performance. The other was, consultants would come in, train people, certify them, move on, one-time training. And, certification was attractive to a lot of people, a lot of companies. And whereas I really wanted to get my own hands dirty, make it part of the DNA of the company, make it part of the culture of the company. So two different approaches. One is consultant comes in, certifies you, and everybody gets a certificate, moves on, one time. What we did was took the harder route, invested time, effort, money, dedicated resources, and developed a homegrown approach, right? That kind of ingrained into the culture of the company, psychological safety and just culture that allowed truly entrepreneurial spirit to flourish at both the companies I founded and one I still run today, KYRO. So let's kind of, with that background there, can you kind of explain a little bit briefly about human performance principles and how companies can benefit from them, if you will?
So when I hear the term human performance, I think about the foundation of human performance, and you've talked about them already when you talked about to err is human, right? Principle number one, and probably the most important one, is that as humans, we're going to make mistakes. I surprise myself every day when I recognize that I'm still making mistakes. And different people say you make different numbers during the day or during the hour, but the fact is we make a lot of mistakes. Another principle is if you want to have high performance from your employees, you need to value your employees. Employees who are encouraged, who are rewarded, who are thanked, who are involved, are going to give you better results. So many times in my career, I have heard employees say that the company was just waiting for them to make a mistake, that they felt like a gun was pointed at them with a hammer cocked, just waiting for a mistake to occur so they could discipline them. Now, that wasn't true, but the fact that the employees felt that way, affected their performance.
But the foundation of the organization might lead the employees to believe in that, right? It's like managers might be incentivized to be political, and your end goal is always, at least in the companies I run, it's always the customer, the employees, and if you take care of them, the investors will be happy, right? It's a very simple way of approaching things, right? So essentially, you're talking about listening to your employees and hearing them out, and if there are good ideas, implement them, building a high performance organization. If your employees are heard, if calculated risk taking is encouraged, in many ways, if you're not failing enough, that means you're not pushing the envelope enough, you're not you're not being entrepreneurial. So if you take those calculated risks and still fail, let's learn collectively what the issues are, what caused the failure, or is it really a failure, or is it a stepping stone to your greater success? So how do you build an entrepreneurial organization with just culture and a high performance organization? That's truly what we're talking about, is when you're listening to employees, make it easy for them to provide feedback, and they see that you've actually listening to them, you're listening to them, and take on some of their ideas. They feel valued at the end of the day, and that's the only way you can build a high performance environment and a great place to work at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with two other quick principles. One is what the organization values is what's going to drive the employee's behavior. Now that's a mouthful, but when you think about it, in our industry, in the electric utility industry, especially from a lineman's perspective, the company values getting the lights turned on and keeping them on, and when they go out, get them back on as quick as possible, right? Speed, speed, speed. Does that influence the behavior of the linemen that are out in the field? Sure it does. Sure it does. So, and there's nothing wrong with being efficient. There's nothing wrong with being productive. There's nothing wrong with getting the lights back on as quick as possible. But we need to make sure that the organization also values the well-being of the employee when they're giving this message out.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll say about the principles are, and to me, this is the most important. This is the part of human performance that really got my attention. And that is, why are we having the same types of accidents over and over, year after year? Because we focus on blaming and discipline and not learning. Think about that. And that's one of the reasons that my boss at the time, Mr. Billy Ball, Mr. William Ball, the reason that he introduced human performance to the non-nuclear side of Southern Company was because it was driving him crazy that he was seeing the same accidents year after year. And he said, you know what? We got great employees. Yeah. They're making the same mistake. It's not them, it's us. We're not learning.
Absolutely. It's interesting you say that, because that's the first thing you got to look at. I mean, you always, that's a really good segue into something you used to talk about quite often, which is, how gas stations evolved, right? Can you kind of talk a little bit about it to our listeners here as to how, back in the day, drivers used to forget that the nozzle was in the car and drive away and cause a lot of accidents. Can you kind of explain that thing and how that process changed so that human error doesn't affect that issue there?
Yeah, so you're going to make me tell on myself here, Hari. Several years ago, driving late at night, after midnight, someone else's vehicle, we stopped at a service station to fill up with gas. I did not get out of the car, but my relative got out and pumped the gas in the car and told me when he got out, he said, I'm going to fill the vehicle up with gas, and then I'm going inside to get me a drink and a pack of cheese crackers, right? So I'm sitting in the driver's seat. I never took my seatbelt off. I see my relative filling up with gas, and then in a minute I see him going to the service station because he told me after I get through filling up with gas, I'm going to get a Diet Coke and a pack of cheese crackers, right? Well, a gentleman behind me in a pickup truck blows his horn.
Pressure. There's the pressure.
Yeah. And my thought is he wants me to get out of the way because he knows that we're through filling up. He wants to come up to the pump, right? So in my mind, I said, be a gentleman, be a good person, get out of the way. So I put the vehicle in drive and I go to pull off. And as I pull off, I feel a tug. And I realized that the hose was still in the tank. I had pulled away from the pump and the hose was still, and I was so embarrassed. I mean, this doesn't happen to me, right? This happens to other people. Well, I get out and there's no...
Well, at least not supposed to, but it did happen.
It did happen, right?
It did happen.
I get out and there's no gas on the ground. There's no gas on the concrete. And this probably 8-10 feet piece of hose was still stuck. The nozzle was stuck in the tank, and I'm pulling the hose behind me and I'm thinking, this is weird, you know? So as embarrassed as I was, I went into the station and I told the young lady, I'm sorry, but I have pulled your gas hose away from your pump. Well, she acted like it was no big deal. She said, you know, no problem, sir. You have two options. She said, you can either give me your credit card and pay for the damages up front, or we can call the police and they can come out here and run a report and send you a bill. And I said, don't call the police. Don't call the police. Right? But anyway, I was so embarrassed. When I got home, I got out my iPhone and I Googled how many people pull away from the pump and take the hose with them, right? I was so embarrassed. And what I learned is that this happens about once per month at every service station across America. Now, it didn't make me feel any better, but I thought, my goodness, what? They don't have signs up warning you, right? They don't have an attendant out there to tell you don't pull away yet, the hose is still in. It's kind of just all up to you.
Yeah.
But what they've done is they haven't tried to fix the human, but they have fixed the system.
Yes.
They put a disconnect in the hose so that because so many people pull away, it just simply disconnects the hose and no gas goes on the ground, on the concrete. And other than being embarrassed and having to pay $125, it was no big deal. But again, to me, that's human performance or human and organizational performance or system improvements, right?
Yeah.
They didn't try to fix the human and the human error. They fixed the system so the gas doesn't go everywhere.
Yeah. No. So essentially, when I see a gas hose lying on the ground at a gas station, that's what it is. I guess somebody just forgot and went
Yeah.
away and
Yeah.
whatever, right? So
It wasn't me, though.
yes. No. All right. So, that's a really good way to explain to our audience here what human performance is. You put enough process checks and balances in place to mitigate the impact of a human error to the least factor as much as possible at the end of the day, right? So, in your case is a classic example. Earlier in the show, we talked about 3 to 5 errors per hour, average human being. Under stress, it's 12 to 15 errors. Somebody honked behind you. You thought you clearly self-inflicted pressure, but you clearly were under pressure, and you didn't think, and that led to loss of money, which could have been more catastrophic, but clearly not in this case, right? So that's what we're trying to do, is to, when linemen doing dangerous jobs, all those jobs that you listed earlier on during your intro, from helper to lineman to apprentice, journeyman lineman, on the distribution side, transmission side, very dangerous jobs. So HP essentially tries to make that a little bit more safer. Having said that, that's a great segue. Our listeners really are wondering at this point, what is the difference between safety and human performance? Can you educate us on that?
Yeah, so that is a great question, and a question that probably is not discussed enough. But when we talk about human performance, we're talking about the human element, right? Humans are going to make mistakes. So when they do make mistakes and there are failures, we want to fail safe. When I was climbing a pole back in the 70s and 80s, we did not put the safety strap around the pole until we finished climbing to where we were going. Whether it was 20 feet, 30 feet, or 100 feet, you did not put that safety strap around that pole, or you would have been called a name by the other lineman, right?
Wow. Wait, that's dangerous, man.
Well, we didn't know any better. That's the way we were taught, right? That was part of the job. And it was only,
And of course, you had to be macho. You're a lineman.
Absolutely.
Nothing
Absolutely.
against you.
And it was only until so many linemen cut out and fell that somebody had the grit, had the courage to say, we're better than this. We're better than this. We ought to have a safety strap around that pole the entire time we're climbing, and we can eliminate cutout and falls altogether. This is an accident we can eliminate. That's the way we ought to be thinking, right?
Yes.
It doesn't make you any less of a man to put that safety strap around that pole.
Yes.
The other thing is, safety and human performance really fit hand in glove. They really do. But human performance is so much more than just safety. It does not matter in what industry you work, what job title you have. If you are a human, human performance improvement, human and organizational performance is part of your life. For an example,
Well, your family is an organization. Right? At the
absolutely.
end of the day, you gotta, it helps, in everyday work. But keep going.
It does
Everyday
a
life, rather.
does a human error in accounting, in finance, could that result in catastrophic failure?
Well, I can tell you, when I was running Think Power about 5 years back, we were almost lost $10 million because of exactly what you're talking about, poor practices in accounting and finance. Since then, I hired who arguably is the best CFO in the industry, and he's taken it to the next level by using some HP principles. But you're right, it could happen.
Yeah. So you ask any employee in an organization, regardless of what organization it is, you ask them, is there an opportunity where a human mistake could end up in a catastrophic consequence? And the answer is going to be yes, right? So then the next question is, can you identify, can you share how that could happen? It may be far-fetched, but can you share how that could happen? And if that answer is probably yes, then your next question is what can we do today? What control can we put in place today that would prevent that?
Yes.
Catch that and prevent that. It's not safety. It could be anything.
Yes. What controls can you put in place so that what is intended to happen is what happens majority or most of the time?
Absolutely.
That's the key. That's the key there.
One of the biggest learnings that we had when I was at Southern Company had nothing to do with safety. It had to do with customer service and accounting. And every employee did everything right by the book. There was no finger to point at anybody. But the system was so designed that the checks and balances were not in place to prevent this catastrophic event from occurring. And it was a customer service failure. We unintentionally mistreated a customer, and it took an event learning process. It took a group of folks who were involved in human performance to go in there and not to say, why did you do this or why didn't you do that, but to say, how did we get here? What did we set out to accomplish, and how were we accomplishing it? And then the error, then, the hole, the gap, the shortcoming shows itself. It's a different approach.
Interesting. All right, so that's a really good overview of how HP helps. Let's get into error prevention tools.
Okay.
Right? Human performance error prevention tools. Can you give our listeners here a brief overview of HP error prevention tools?
Yeah, so we talked about to err is human, right? And depending on what you're doing, the pressures that are involved in the job could increase the probability of those errors occurring. So the introduction of human performance tools or error prevention tools are designed, every one of them are designed primarily to do two things. One is to slow the worker down. As workers, we've been trained since we were in kindergarten to do things fast, read fast, walk fast, right? Everything's based on speed. Everything's based on time. So a human performance or an error prevention tool is designed to slow the human down. And the other thing it does,
by
design,
slow you down to eventually accelerate the end result because you're making less mistakes.
Slow me down so I have time to engage my brain.
Yes.
Slow me down so I stop and take a breath and I say, you know what? I need to make sure I do this. I need to make sure I've already done this. Whether it's a 1 minute rule, a 1 minute timeout, whether it's a checklist. I mean, how often do we use checklists?
All the time.
How often do we put reminders on our iPhone? Why do men put their keys and wallet in the same place every night when they go to bed, right?
Yeah. But
these are all human performance tools.
But that you say that, but my kids move my wallet and phones and keys all over the place. So every day it's in a different spot, man. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what error prevention tools do is they slow us down so that we have time to really think about what we're doing and make sure that we're doing it with total confidence, that we accomplish what we set out to accomplish, no more, no less. And that when we're through, we look back and we say, job well done, right?
Awesome, awesome.
And
Listen,
here's the trip cord, right? Distractions. How
there
many
are lots of them
times
today. There are lots of
how
them
many
today.
times have you been doing something perfectly and you got distracted and then you realize, oh my goodness, I forgot to do something or I did it wrong?
Really, you forget what you do. I mean, honestly, when you're working out, for example, or swimming laps or doing whatever you do, you kind of forget which lap you're in or which set you're in because your mind wanders away from you, right? So you got to bring
Absolutely.
it back. And that happens all the time, especially in today's day and age of distracted driving. I see people just driving like this all the time with their phone in front of them. It's honestly, it scares me to death. And we just, but it may be their fault, but it's still our accident, right? So we got to
Yep.
be very careful about it. So, Jeff, we've talked a lot about human performance. We're in the age of AI, as you very well know, right? You can't read news today without reading about AI, right? Many people are using AI for so many different things. Some people use it to write, some people use it to create videos. You may use it to help with your golf game, to be candid, right? So, where do you think AI has a role in human performance, or does it? Does it have a role in human performance? What's your take on it?
Well, Hari, to be totally honest, when you talk about AI, you're talking about a topic that I'm not that familiar with, whether it be my age or my experience. But I am fascinated when I hear the term AI and I see things that have been created by what's called AI, right? And the way I look at that is anytime we can come up with a control or a tool for that matter, an error prevention tool, and let's say we can use AI to calculate data, to process data in a quicker fashion, in a more timely fashion, and in a way that captures what we're wanting to capture, and then use that information from a predictability perspective to predict, hey, if we don't change this, this is what's going to happen. I think that's brilliant. In addition to using AI in training videos and safety training videos and compliance videos, if we can compile and compress and collect data that typically would take 6 months or a year, and we can do it in a month or 2 or 3 weeks, I think that's great. I think that's brilliant.
Wow, wow, that's interesting, right? So even for your generation, which kind of is not really into AI, so to speak, right? It's amazing that how you see the possibility of how AI can be used as an error prevention tool, right? That's amazing. Do you remember us being in Reno?
I do.
I, people have always wondered, Jeff, but I want to ask you this. They've always wondered, how did an immigrant from India and a redneck from Alabama work so well together? Can you please explain to people what's the secret sauce there? Can tell me how did it happen? What's the secret for our success here?
I think it has a lot to do with our personalities. I think we have a lot more in common than we have differences. You talked about Kent Peterson, who introduced us. Kent told me, said, this guy's from India, and he's hard to understand, and he talks real fast, but he's really, really smart, and I think you'll enjoy meeting him. And he was right on target. I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by your energy. I'm intrigued by how smart you are. And that interests me. And I know you're interested in my southern dialect, aren't you?
I agree with you on that. So it's good stuff. So rapid fire questions, Jeff.
Uh-oh,
Does it make you sweat? Are you sweating already?
probably.
All right. NFL versus college football.
College.
Interesting. Why?
We don't have an NFL team in Alabama, so we choose between Alabama and Auburn. And as soon as you get of age, old enough to understand, you're asked, take a pick. You got to pick one or the other.
Interesting. That's it's a great segue. Auburn Tigers versus Alabama Tide.
Alabama Crimson Tide.
Wow. Wow. All right. Well, then let's keep going then. Nick Saban versus Kalen DeBoer.
I got to go with Saban.
He's giving you how many? 7 championships? Is that right?
Yes.
6 or 7.
Six at Alabama, 1 at LSU.
LSU. So what do you say to? I have some friends here who have season ticket holders at LSU. What do you think of LSU fans?
I think they got some great fans and they got a great football team. But if I had a choice and I was Nick Saban, I'd rather go to Alabama than LSU any day.
Interesting. Why is that?
I think it's just it's a step up. You're not going to get me. You're not going to get me in trouble, Hari. You're not going to get me to say the wrong thing. I have LSU friends.
I'm really needling you.
I know.
Really needling you.
I know.
You guys gave I think $87.5 million to Kalen DeBoer, and they gave what $100 million to
Brian Kelly.
Brian Kelly. I don't know if anyone is going to bring you a championship. So, next question, Jim Harbaugh.
What about him?
What do you think?
Interesting. Puzzling.
Why is that?
I don't know where he's coming from at times.
Interesting.
Some of his comments and actions are puzzling.
Khaki pants and the intensity. Well, he got a championship. Is that a legitimate?
Yeah.
Is that a legitimate championship, or does it come with an asterisk?
I think it's legit.
Okay, all right, that's good. Arch Manning.
I hope he's not as good as advertised, but I'm afraid he is.
Interesting. So sounds like you guys are scared to see him this season, huh?
Well, everything I've read and everything I've seen, I think he's the real deal. He comes from great stock, great DNA. From what I understand, he's a great individual, good guy, has a lot of humility. And it's hard not to pull for somebody like that.
Yeah.
I just hope he has one bad game.
They say that the UT football, today under Sarkisian is pretty much the same as what Saban built for you guys in Alabama at Crimson Tide. And they have more money, and they obviously have the brand recognition. They have Arch Manning. So let's see. Only time will tell. Obviously, Saban won 6 championships, and they're still getting started there. So let's see what happens. You're president for a day, Jeff. Final question on the rapid fire. You're president for a day, right? Assuming you have full control of Congress, right? Senate, House. What do you do?
I do away with taxes for all seniors.
Interesting.
Yeah.
No taxes at all
No taxes at all.
for seniors. And why is that?
I think by the time you get to be 65 years old or older, you've given a lot. You're kind of for most people on a fixed income. You may want to go back and do some more work. You may have something to offer, but I think many times the tax code that we live under is discouraging. And I think there are a lot of seniors, and when I say seniors, I'm talking about 65 to 75 who still have a lot to offer, but they choose not to because of the tax consequences.
Interesting. Yeah, obviously you retired before you came and helped me, and it was beyond helpful for me. I mean, obviously contributed heavily to the economy because of the success of Think Power in KYRO. That's an interesting thought process there. So hopefully people are listening, and somebody will take up your ask there. So there are obviously other problems in the world. If there is one global problem you would solve, what would that be?
Probably child trafficking.
Interesting.
That bothers me a lot. I have a tender heart when it comes to children, and to see children mistreated really bothers me.
Interesting.
I try not to get upset. I try not to show a temper. But when you start hurting children, you start really bothering me.
Bothering you, and obviously it significantly impacts the next generation, right? You corrupt a young mind in some way, shape, or form, and that has a long-lasting impact for the rest of their child's life. And I've seen this where the family, the next few generations struggle, right? Because, the repercussions carry forward for several generations forward. So that's it. That's a wrap. But listen, I genuinely appreciate the relationship. I genuinely appreciate you coming on the show. I hope the listeners find this conversation to be worth their time. And I mean it in as deep as my heart can go. Every sincere word I can say is, if there are a handful of people who made immeasurable difference to Think Power and to KYRO, Jeff White would be in the top of that list, right? One of the top 5 in that list. And I deeply appreciate you helping me set up phenomenal companies that have the potential to have sustained success. And, deeply appreciate the relationship. And every time I call you, answer the phone, and you're there to counsel me. Appreciate it.
Well, you're a kind gentleman, Hari, and I feel the same way about you that you just stated you feel about me. And I'll say this: when we talk about human performance, it is not smoke and mirrors. It is not the marketing ploy of the day or the month. It's not the magical wand or anything. It's just a different way of thinking that recognizes that we're human, right? We're just human, and we're trying to do the best we can. And you've done a great job at both Think Power Solutions and KYRO in getting the buy-in from your employees because you treat them right. And I appreciate that.
Appreciate the kind words there. Jeff White, thank you so much. I know you're retired, but if people want to reach you, is there a way that they can reach you?
Yeah, sure. If somebody has questions and I can help them in any way, they can reach out to me. I guess the best way to do it would be by email, and that's just simply jeffwhiteconsulting@gmail.com.
Yep. They should do the heavy lifting, and you're there to provide guidance. So, Jeff White, thank you so much for being on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you, bud.
Coming up next on From Boots to Boardroom,
90% of the rules are written for 10% of the employees.
R.L. Grubbs, a health and safety expert, a Vietnam War veteran, and a Purple Heart Award recipient, shares how grit, empathy, and a focus on safety transformed both his career and the utility industry.
For a guy who lives 17 miles from your mailbox, really out there in the country, you do handle technology pretty well. So that's pretty impressive.
There's normally 2 types of rule. One of them is a should rule, that this is a good idea, but you can deviate from it if there's a good reason to. The other one's a shall rule, which says this carries the force of law. We don't have the authority. We have to follow this to the letter.
Stay tuned